Hello, my name is Chiara Bonacchi and I'm a researcher on the MicroPasts project at UCL. We all know that the sustainability of heritage and the sustainability of research in the humanities have been a challenge for quite some time, even if we understand sustainability just in financial terms, so as the ability to manage risk, to react to internal and external shock and continue delivering service without substantial disruptions. And equally, the need to diversify funding schemes beyond grant financing has been invoked repeatedly in the last few decades, especially in the UK as a result of a policy shift of the last 50 years. Arguably, however, in the last few years, what happened is that some of these old problems have become more urgent. And we've seen across Europe a reduction in employment. You see here an example in the slide for archaeology. Reduced public funding, particularly severe in Southern Europe, but even in happier or relatively happier lands like the UK, where bodies like the Heritage Lottery Fund do exist and have not been negatively affected in their income by the crisis, the competition for the public funding available has exploded. So increasing attention has been devoted to web technologies to try and find new solutions for some of these old problems. And initially, what was highlighted was mainly the potential of these web technologies to enable partnerships between the cultural sector and the ICT sector, in order to aid the sustainability of culture. What has been highlighted has been really the potential of these web technologies to enable instead collaborations between citizens based inside institutions and citizens outside institutions. Ultimately leading to the emergence of what has sometimes also been referred to with the buzzword as a new cultural ecology, where the boundaries between what has been traditionally referred to as a public sector, a private sector, and a third sector have become more blurred. In this context, archaeology has been exploring new and light methodologies, so alternative to and integrated with excavation. Amongst these is crowdsourcing, as Andy was mentioning at the beginning, so the practice of leveraging, collecting services, funds, and information in small chunks from relatively large groups of people online. Attention has been dedicated to open data and open practices, also with a view to understand the extent to which these data generated and made available online can actually really be very large or even big. And finally, new interest has been showed towards public archaeology as the area of study that is devoted specifically to study the relationship between archaeology and society with the aim of improving it. So the MicroPasts project has drawn on these various elements that I've mentioned and combined them in a new way to try and provide some responses to that challenge of sustainability that I was mentioning at the beginning by leveraging web technologies. The project started in October 2013 as a collaboration between the UCL Institute of Archaeology and the British Museum, seed funded by the UK Arts and Humanities Research Council. And the aim was really that of establishing and studying new collaborations between researchers based in institutions, universities, museums, and members of the public online, citizens beyond these institutions, in order to study the human past. And to do so by doing one or more of these three things that are listed. So, creating new open archaeological and historical data through crowdsourcing, using these data to develop and design collaboratively new research in archaeology and history, also with the use of forum technologies, and microfinancing community archaeology and community history projects through crowdfunding. To achieve this aim, we have developed the MicroPasts.org platform, which has 3 core web components. The first is a crowdsourcing website through which the public can really help to create new open data. It was launched in April last year, and here we have made available a number of kinds of different applications, each kind to create a distinct kind of data. So there are for georeferencing and transcription, 3D photomasking to enable 3D modeling, and so on. All these applications are research-orientated, which means that we would deploy them to create data for which we anticipate a specific use for research, although we understand that this use might be not the only one in the end. There is a forum also launched in April last year together with a crowdsourcing site, which has been used to host a number of discussions that helped to solve technical problems, discussions in terms of how we collaboratively create data, so knowledge exchange and 3D modeling, and we'll hear more about that later, and also how we can co-develop and take forward the project and the platforms. There is a crowdfunding website launched later on in October last year, through which we have it is possible to raise funds for up to £5,000 to finance small projects, research projects in archaeology, history and heritage that have been developed and, if funded, would be conducted together by mixed teams, including researchers based in institutions and community groups. In the past year, not only we have developed these platforms and launched them at slightly different times, but we have also used them in slightly different ways. And there are 3 phases that have emerged in our way of building collaborations. And I say emerged because we haven't predefined them. They emerged from our interaction with contributors, with collaborators. They are different in terms of the outreach approach that was used, the participants involved, the kinds of participation that were enabled through the platforms, with reference also to Nina Simon's models of participation. So you see the first chart shows the number of new members joining MicroPasts from April to present, registered ones. The second chart shows the task rounds that have been submitted, the upper one, that have been submitted from April to present via the site. We started with the first phase where outreach was that of the launch of the crowdsourcing platform and the forum. What we did was having a press release out, which led to some online publicity, although not at national scale level, and mainly in the form of blog posts and articles in newspapers and magazines. And also we had targeted communications. We sent emails and did talks to try and involve community groups established offline, such as archaeological societies, metal detectorists, who were already involved with the PASS, the Portable Antiquity Scheme, and who we thought might be interested in taking part in MicroPasts. The participation at this stage was mainly in terms of mainly of a contributory kind, so people were submitting tasks, rather mechanical tasks, through the crowdsourcing site, and helping to transcribe object cards to 3D photomask images. But what we noticed is that in the summer months, the number of new members joining daily had slightly dropped, and also the number of task runs. People, and especially those that had been more involved, wanted to move a step farther and be involved in a greater and deeper way. So we moved to a second phase in our way of building up collaborations. And we benefited from an article published in The Guardian which really helped in terms of outreach to get a lot more members involved. And in terms of participation, we moved to a more collaborative and co-creative kind of participation. We involved some of our contributors in discussions on how we could take the project farther, and how they were reviewing the project itself and what they were wishing to do more or less of. These, the comments that came out and the decisions made were then implemented during the autumn and winter months when we reviewed, for example, the photomasking work, and we invited some of the more involved collaborators to actually also use the crowdsourced data and help to consolidate them or use them to create 3D models offline, learning how to do that as well. Because we used and chose a public archaeology approach, we've also been looking and researching the build-up of these collaborations, who was involved and how, and the value of this participation for different people and also institutions. So we know, for example, that we've been successful in involving citizens not based in institutions, and here you see 73% of our collaborators do not work with archaeology or history as part of their main job. We saw, however, that we were a bit less successful in involving groups of interest already established offline, particularly archaeological societies, as the chart shows. Our group of collaborators at the moment has a distinct presence online, but we could say that does not cooperate to any substantial extent offline. In terms of socio-demographics, it is interesting compared to other crowdsourcing projects, the fact that some of our more involved collaborators also come from non-English speaking countries, and this is because we have some applications that do not require advanced level of English, as we will see in further detail later. Whereas other socio-demographic characteristics are instead in line with what has been found by previous studies on crowdsourcing. So our collaborators tend to be very active people, whether in employment or retired, and they have diverse skill sets, which include business management, curatorship, communication, photography, IT, and also archaeology, history. Maybe they got a degree in these areas, but for various reasons they didn't make a career out of it. In terms of participation, we have been working with 3 core contributor groups. There's a group of fleetingly involved people contributing just 1 or 2 tasks and then leaving, which was much larger at the beginning when we launched, and then progressively has become thinner and thinner. There is a group of people who have been participating in a quite sustained way through time, but in a light touch way, so not being, for example, in the leaderboard. And there is a core group of people who instead have been participating very intensely in the crowdsourcing and now in the 3D modeling and in a sustained way through time. This group, in terms of crowdsourcing, is responsible for the creation of the majority of the data. And here you see that actually only a quarter of our collaborators, of our over 1,500 collaborators, have submitted through the crowdsourcing site more than 16 tasks. In terms of motivations, why are collaborators working with MicroPasts? You see in the upper box there are some motivations that can be found in relation to a number of leisure time activities, and in the lower box motivations that can be found more in relation to crowdsourcing, with some that are, I think, more specific of MicroPasts in particular. So some people have been engaging because they wanted to have a learning experience or a training opportunity for themselves and their family and friends. They were interested in learning perhaps about archaeology and history as disciplines, or about specific collections and periods, or about, for example, methods such as the 3D modeling. And these categories are, of course, not mutually exclusive. Some just wanted to have a relaxation experience, particularly in relation to the photomasking, this was mentioned, or appreciated, for example, aesthetically, the cards and the drawings and the objects that they were working with. Some did it just because for the social motivation of helping out, and actually this is also part of a wider volunteering engagement, so they volunteer in a wide range of fields, not just culture, not just online. Some wanted to make valuable use of their knowledges and skills, and found that MicroPasts was actually a way to reconnect or maintain a connection with their field of studies, and something they had studied but was not part of their daily job. Obviously also the desire to advance scientific knowledge, take part in research, and for some competition, and thankfully only for a few ones, this was a core motivation. A very brief mention on our crowdfunding component because of the time available, limited time available. So, out of the 4 seed projects that featured on the crowdfunding site, one was successful in securing enough funding in order to launch its activities. This is the London's Lost Waterway project proposed by the Thames Discovery Project. And an analysis of the donations that were made, donor profiles, donor motivations, allowed us to understand that the reason for the success of this project specifically was that beyond the research component, leveraging those light methodologies that I was mentioning at the beginning, they also had a preservation component. So the placemaking agenda, if we want to call it that way, helping to improve the local area, preserving the archaeology of one's local area, was a great trigger in terms of securing donations. The other is the fact that the group really understood crowdfunding more as a catalyst for fundraising. So they also accepted, for example, larger sponsorships and donations in hand, which were submitted by the site, through the site. At a later stage, and these donations were raised in the context of the crowdfunding campaign, so they came as a result of it, but in a first instance, they were not submitted online, and only later this was done. So an initial conclusion on the value of the project so far. Social and scientific value, where these components are understood as being mutually reinforcing, and because they have been mutually reinforcing. We have had evidence of skill building through the MicroPasts project and career development, not only for the staff involved learning new web-based methods, but also for collaborators, and some of them reported that they could learn skills that actually improved their CVs and helped them to apply for jobs they could not apply before. Acquisition of new knowledge, discovery of new interests, a personal sense of achievement, what I said, being able to use skills that they had learned as part of their studies. Change of attitudes and behavior, in particular as regards competition. So we had discussion to, particularly in this regard, to understand community values and what was important as part of the, what was important, what the community felt it was important as part of their contribution to MicroPasts. And also an improvement of teamwork skills. In more strictly scientific terms, we have at the moment 47 applications completed, which means that over 2/3 of the National Bronze Age Implement Index have been transcribed. We have generated 66 3D models. We have produced open source platforms and applications that are modular, so they can be tweaked and reused for a number of other research projects in archaeology and history. And we have produced some knowledge that hopefully will be useful to foster further discussion together with other practitioners and policymakers. And this will be possible also thanks to some additional funding that we have obtained from the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And I think I'll leave it to Adi to continue.
Okay. So I'm now going to move to talk about a little bit more about deeper levels of engagement. And at the same time, I'll dwell a little bit more on our working procedures. So up until November last year, our crowdsourcing efforts focused on engaging people through our online platform. For about 7 or 8 months, we let the data flow in, and there was a lot of it. But by far, most of our data came from transcription and photo masking applications. In order to make this data useful, one had to review it, clean it, extract the best results, prepare it in a useful way, or use it to create 3D models. After finishing the 3D models, we check the models and give feedback on the forum. If all good, models are uploaded to 2 places: the MicroPasts data center and our in-house WebGL viewer, and Sketchfab. Our data page includes links to all of the project data, both raw and generated data. For example, it links to our Flickr site, where we store the scans of the British Museum index cards. It links to crowdsourced raw data, as well as, when ready, to consolidated data. It also links to the 3D models when these are ready to be viewed. Our in-house WebGL viewer allows people to view metadata on each model. It also allows to measure the object, which is quite an important feature for archaeological artifacts. A second platform to which we upload 3D models is called Sketchfab. Sketchfab is an online platform where you can publish your 3D models and view other content. In their words, they'd like to be, for 3D models, what YouTube is for videos. Instead of sharing 2D screenshots of your models, you can actually share your 3D models via this platform, embed them on your website through Facebook, WordPress, LinkedIn page, etc., and allow others to download your models directly from your Sketchfab page. You can see how many people viewed each model, liked a model, downloaded it, or commented on it. One of the main benefits for MicroPasts in using Sketchfab is the exposure which our 3D models get. One really useful tool that Sketchfab offers is the annotation tool. This tool enables to tag areas of the object with text, so museum curators, for example, can run an object handling session online. Instead of viewing photos of an object alongside text, you could actually interact with the object and read about it as you go. So we have much raw data coming in from different apps. We have consolidated data, we have 3D models, but what's the quality of this data, and how do we make sure not to compromise it? As with any crowdsourcing project, working with a large community has its challenges. There is no guarantee that user inputs are correct or accurate. This may happen due to several reasons. Users may accidentally make mistakes due to sloppiness or misjudgment. Sometimes people unfamiliar with our platform just play around with the apps and therefore don't submit good results. Other users may secretly want to climb up our leaderboard and therefore complete tasks in a haste. This can threaten the quality of generated data. As mentioned before, we use the commonplace method of redundancy, meaning for each of our crowdsourcing applications, we decide how many times should a task be presented before it is considered completed, and then the app moves on to present the next task. Normally, this number would be 2 or 3, and it is based mostly on our own experience. With transcription apps, for example, we found the best number for redundancy to be 3. We made this decision after examining results for our transcription apps and the possible variations in answers per task. Photo masking apps usually have redundancy of 2, as most submitted results are adequate. We started off with a high number of redundancy for our apps and kept reducing it. The first main reason for this was that we discovered that we do usually get high quality and accurate results. And second, most of our tasks are submitted by our core contributors, who gained so much knowledge and experience over time and are now submitting excellent results. The second level of quality control depends on the application at hand. Results can be checked by one of the MicroPasts team members, one of MicroPasts contributors, helping with data consolidation or going over the masks and choosing the best ones. Other organizations linked to the apps. For example, we have a transcription and translation application from New Forest National Park Authority. So someone from that organization will review the data coming in and will consolidate in translations. Once this data is checked and consolidated and 3D models are constructed, how can you access the data, and what is it good for? Our data is open, copyright-free, and available to download from several locations. Crowdsourced data can be directly downloaded from our platform. Raw data such as index cards can be viewed and downloaded from our Flickr account. Raw and generated data such as object photos and 3D models can be downloaded from our Amazon Simple Storage service. Models can also be downloaded from Sketchfab. And as previously mentioned, our data center page collects all of these sources together and is generally a good place to look for MicroPast project data. And in addition, we have all of our platform code available on GitHub, so it's all out there for people to use, to look at and use. In terms of data uses, they greatly vary. 3D models can be used in different ways. They can be reused in multimedia applications. For example, someone named Joe Rigby created an online museum using virtual reality and embedded some of our models within this environment. 3D models can be used for research. For example, Rob Coletta, a PhD student at UCL, plans on using models of Bronze Age pulse staves to closely compare their morphology. Another example is Andy Bevan's research on the Chinese terracotta warriors, finding morphological differences between them by creating and comparing their 3D models. The Portable Antiquity Scheme started to embed 3D models hosted on Sketchfab in their online database. So in general, these models are a good way to enhance online catalogs. Annotations, as seen on Sketchfab, are especially useful for archaeological objects as they enhance user interaction with these artifacts. Some examples of other data uses. Transcription data, such as the National Bronze Implements Index, can be used to create searchable database or add to existing ones. Photo tagging data can be used to enhance digital archives of photos or cards and increase their searchability. Statistical data on rice cultivation can contribute to research on rice agriculture in Asia and the impact on local populations. Line and polygon drawings of amphora shapes enable the creation of 3D solid of revolution models, which allow research on the volumetric capacity of these vessels or their center of gravity, for example. Similar line and polygon drawings of Bronze Age pulse staves can help perform two-dimensional morphometric analysis on axe shapes. So the potential is endless. How do we plan to sustain this? With funds received from the AHRC for a follow-on project, we aim to enable a community-led model of platform and project management that is sustainable in the longer term. Interested MicroPast contributors could be involved in the day-to-day running of the MicroPast platforms, development and maintenance of collaborations with partnering institutions, as well as community management. We plan to develop the technical resources and guidelines that are necessary for a community-led platform management. Tutorial topics will include, for example, access, use, and moderation of our social media, the community forum, the research blog, deployment of new crowdsourcing applications, access and management of the crowdfunding website, and more. We hope that a continually successful collaboration between MicroPast team members and our contributors will allow for the project not only to operate, but also to flourish in the longer term. Thank you.